Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we got a spicy deck profile. This was piloted by Minsu. No, this was such a luxury gaming series event that they held over the weekend. Um, yeah, Gren Maju deck, top four. I believe there was like 5 or 6 rounds of Swiss, and then a top 16. Um, this is on Luxury Gaming's Facebook page. Like they have the entire top 16 here. Also, since it's a picture on Facebook, I might not know all the cards' names. Uh, I know, I'm super casual. I know. I know, like, what the cards do based on their picture, if that helps. I don't know if that helps or makes it worse. I don't know. But this is just a fun deck profile that I wanted to see. Kind of piggybacks off of the video I did on Monday, where we had, like, a little bit more unique decks. Not just like, hey, here's Sword Soul Tenny again. Hey, here's Despia Branded again. Gren Maju deck profile. This is a going second Gren Maju deck as well. And I believe Minsu No has a YouTube channel. So he could probably explain it further in depth, but I just wanted to take a look at it just to show you guys that you don't have to be running the most meta deck ever. One, you don't have to be running the most meta deck ever to top, but two, you need to be worried about this deck. This deck exists, and it's very powerful. But we are running 2 copies of Alpha Master of the Beast. It's such a good card right now against Branded Despia and Sword Soul. They summon their level 8 Masquerade or the Synchro Monster, Chao Xing or whatever its name is, and they have to use their effect. You know, it's like effect to bounce and bounce to level 8. They have to do something, right? What's cool about this too, the actual second place was piloted by Vivok, who's running this punk adventurer deck, right? Really trying to get out the Scythe Lock. This deck doesn't care about that, right? So if your opponent, and in a lot of cases, you know, the Scythe Lock is not like DP. DP is great against everything. Scythe Lock is good against decks that use their extra deck, which is a lot of decks, but not this one, right? So what we can do, our opponent Scythe Locks us, we're like, okay. And so then we summon this guy out, and now they got 1 or 2 maybe disruptions and a Scythe Lock. We bait out 1 of their disruptions, and now we could just play. We could just play for free, right? Because this card can bounce itself back and summon itself right back out. 3 copies of Danger Bigfoot, 3 copies of Danger Thunderbird, 3 copies of Gadarla, the Mystery Dust Kaiju, 3 copies of Gamma Seal, the Sea Turtle Kaiju? I think that's its name. It doesn't look like a sea turtle. Maybe it is a sea. Maybe it's not a sea turtle. I'm not sure. 3 copies of Gizmek, I think. 1 copy of Dino Wrestler Pankertops, 3 copies of Dimension Shifter, because duh. Like, there's a reason why there are no hand traps in this deck except D-Shifter. What's also great about D-Shifter is the interaction it has with Danger. So Ash Blossom, Droll and Lockbird, Effective Ailer to an extent. DD Crow, Hiwate, Skullmeister, Ghost Bell, Ghost Reaper, Ghost Ogre, Phantasme, Nibiru. List goes on and on. All of those hand traps, Maxi, it's banned right now, but all of those hand traps require your opponent to do something, which is why you can't really run them with a danger deck. Because if you run them with a danger deck, your opponent doesn't do anything, you play a danger card, you discard your hand trap, nothing happens. But D-Shifter doesn't require you to do anything at all. So now we can play D-Shifter immediately, start using our danger cards, right? And we don't care. They get banished, we draw. We don't care because we want cards to be banished. That's the secret of the deck. We want them to be banished, right? I really like D-Shifter in the deck. What I also like about D-Shifter, it's just a powerful hand trap. Not just because it banishes, but just because it just shuts so many deck outs. Just so many decks are just like, oh, my cards can't go to the graveyard. That kind of is all that I'm trying to do, right? So I love 3 copies of D-Shifter, 2 copies of Gren Maju de Aiza. I've never known how this card is pronounced. This is one of my favorite. This is one of the first Yu-Gi-Oh cards I ever owned, and I still don't know its name, or at least how to pronounce it. 3 copies of Eater of a Millions. It's kind of like our second win con. I mean, there's a lot of win cons. Right? We got a lot of big monsters we can summon, but Eater of a Millions is a crazy card. And if you're not aware of what Eater of Millions does, you can banish up to, I think it's 5 to 15 cards from your extra deck. Special summon this card. When it attacks an opponent's monster, it can just, instead of declaring, before damage calculation, it just or before the damage step. One of the two. That's pretty relevant. But before, because either happens in the damage calculation, which I think it's before the damage step. You can just banish the opponent's monster face down, right? So it's a super easy out to cards that can't be targeted, cards that can't be destroyed. This card, either of the minutes doesn't care, right? 3 copies of Allure of Darkness because we were running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different dark monsters all at 3. It's pretty good. And then we don't really care if our cards get banished, right? This card's probably going to get hit. I mean, if we look at, you know, the top, that's Allure's there. I guess not a lot of the top 16s running Allure. A good amount of the top, there's 2. So maybe it won't get hit, but it is a very powerful card in decks that can run it. 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. 3 copies of Lightning Storm. We're just breaking our opponent's boards. We're breaking and breaking and breaking. 2 copies of Pot of Desires. 3 copies of Trade-In. If you notice, I mean, there's Pankratops and Foolish, but everything else is a 2 or 3 of. So we don't really care about Pot of Desires. The chances of us losing our Gren Majus, no, right? The chances of us, you know, losing our, it's not going to happen, right? And the thing is with Trade-In, level 8, level 8, level 8, level 8, level 8, level 8. It's always going to be live. It's, I mean, yes, you could like draw Trade-In, Allure, Eater of the Millions, Gren Maju, and Foolish, but this card is almost always going to be live, right? Absolutely insane. 2 copies of Concentrated Contract. I have no idea. I know what the card does. It's a quick play spell that says target 1 monster you control, it gains attack equal to its defense. Right? And Gren Maju's attack and defense are all stacked off of the banished pile. Right? So then this card can get pretty beefy. This card can be dropped 4K, 5K, 8K, 10K. I'm being dead serious. It gets 400 attack times each banished card. This card banishes 10 cards when it for cost. So this we do this, you ash it, we drop this card, attack. You're like, oh yeah, that's fine. This card just has 4,000 attack. Actually, it has 8,000. Right? Or we play Pot of Desires, we play Allure of Darkness, we use Gizmek, we summon Eater of Millions. That's really what this deck is trying to do. All this deck is trying to do is trying to stun you, is trying to slow the game down to get it to a simplified game state where they can drop Garen Maju and win the duel. Essentially what this deck's trying to do. That's why Mystic Mind is so perfect in it. Can't wait for this card to get banned. And then 1 copy of Foolish Burial. And that's it for the main deck. 45 card main deck. Something I wanted to mention too about that. And the reason why most people want to run a 40 card deck is more consistent. The less cards you have to run, the less likely you are to draw bricks or bad hands, the more likely you are to draw the cards you want to see. But the meta seems to be shifting. I mean, you know, this is second place was running 43, top 8 was running 50, first place was running 46. I was taking a look at these deck profiles, and there was really, I only saw one player, if we can even see it, Enzio Fiolos, who was running a 40 card deck. And Tri Brigade, it makes sense, right? Because Tri Brigade has such a small little engine, 2 Karas, 3 Kid, 3 Fractal, 3 Nerval, 3 Rescue Cat. And then we're just running a bunch of hand traps. That's really all Tri Brigade's doing. So with that, it's almost like, unless that's the case, and that's really the end of their deck profiles, you should be running more than 40 cards. That's just kind of the vibe. Like, you obviously you can run 40 to 60. It's up to you, right? You know, if I say you have to run more than 40, you can be like, no, right? You do whatever you want. But it does seem like the best players, like I said, second place was running 43, and first place was running 46, on top of this deck running 45. Me personally, I don't really like running more than 40 unless I'm running Pot of Desires, but maybe it's just something I should just try. Because at the end of the day, you know, 40 card decks feel like the right amount, but clearly other players are having success with more than 40 card decks, right? But for the side deck, we are running 2 copies of There Can Only Be One. I actually watched it. It was on DB Grinder. DB Grinder has like this entire tournament on his channel, so you go ahead and check that out. But Minsu sided this in against Branded Despia. So this is a really good card against a lot of decks. Like this deck, Branded Despia, they're not one of them, right? Like Salomon Great, Dragon Link, Sword Soul, fantastic. Floanderies, fantastic. Branded Despia, which is who he was facing, maybe not as much, right? But 2 copies of Anti-Spell, phenomenal card. Let me look at all these decks are running spells. Look at all the green cards. Look at all the green cards. And you have to set them before you can activate them because we played Anti-Spell, right? 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier, 3 copies of Summon Limit. Card came up a lot. Like, this is such a... We summon Eater of the Million, summon Gren Maju, and we just wait. 3 copies of Different Dimension Ground. If you don't know what this card does, for the rest of the turn, any card set, I believe, from the deck or field to the graveyard are banished instead, just for the turn. So what you can actually do, you can actually run this card in non-banishing decks and stun against decks that do banish, right? And sometimes we've seen this card played that way. A lot of cases, though, we see it in Gren Maju, right? Or like Metaphys, or like any other deck, like Floanderies, any other deck that doesn't really care too much about their cards being banished. Just as another copy of Dimension Fissure, right? Even though it's a trap card, unfortunately, it only lasts for the 1 turn. Dimension Fissure's at 1, right? And it's not going anywhere anytime soon if these decks keep topping, right? And then 1 copy of Macrocosmos. And this was kind of what I was talking about on Monday when we saw that going second Floanderies deck. And I mentioned that, like, whenever I build a blind second deck, this is my thought process. It's like, okay, really good players, and you're going to find really good players in this game if you keep doing enough tournaments. They will be able to identify, okay, my opponent just played Lightning Storm, Pankratops, and Alpha in the first duel. I won the die roll. I went first. My opponent played Alpha, got rid of my card, bounced his card back, played Lightning Storm, destroyed all my back row, and then summoned Pankratops and got rid of another card. I think they're playing a going second deck. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say I'm going to side. They're going to think I'm siding for going first, right? And then I'm going to tell them to go first. All right? And now, maybe you get confused and you don't side too much and they tell you to go first and you're running this deck and you just got to keep your fingers crossed, right? But if that's the case, we have the option to go first. And that's what I was saying in the Floanderies deck. When I build a blind second deck, almost all of my cards in the side deck are going first cards because I want to have the option to go first if I can. And if you're running a lot of going second cards in your side deck and you're playing a going second deck, you're probably just going to lose more games than you should have, right? Just because you're going to get stuck going first. So I really like this deck profile. Obviously, Minsu cares a lot about what Hot Dog Flexor thinks about his deck. Maybe not as much, but just something to keep in mind, right, going forward. All right, doesn't mean necessarily you're the worst duelist ever if you have going second cards in your side deck and in your main deck. It's just you want to be as versatile as possible, right? For the extra deck, please bear with me. I can't see their names, all right? 1 copy of number 92. This guy number 92. Okay, I'm pretty sure this guy summons this guy and puts a material underneath. And I think this is the material. Or maybe this guy summons this guy. Or maybe this guy is a girl. But anyway, I know these two, this is like the spider, this is like Sins or something like that. These two get put onto this one, this one, or this one, or this one. These two get placed onto there, so we can drop this guy or girl and use the effect multiple times, right? Because we are running 1 copy of A Zeus, we are running a lot of Xyz monsters. I genuinely don't know what this card is. 1 copy of Topologic Zoroboros, I believe is this card's name. So if you don't know what this card does, because we don't really see it too often, if a monster is summoned to a zone this card points to, banish all cards in the field. It's either banish all cards in the field or banish all cards this card points to. One of the two. I'm pretty sure it's banish all cards in the field. Other than itself, right? And so now what we're doing, we're stalling our opponent out. We're stalling our opponent out by playing this. We're kind of both locked, right? Because our opponent's setting a card. This card's beating it over. We summon a card, banish all the cards, and we're in a very simplified game state. This card could just win off of that, by the way. And especially in a deck that loves banishing cards, this card's phenomenal. 1 copy of Lancelot, 1 copy of this card, 1 copy of Selene, 1 copy of the Fire Charmer. I don't know why they're running the Fire. Like, the only Fire monster they're running is Gren Maju. And I don't know why, like, Eater of the Millions, Gizmek, one of the Kaijus, or even, like, if you draw a D-Shifter and you tribute summon it for some reason, or one of, like, the Dangers. I could see those being used as link material. I don't know why we'd use Gren Maju for link material. Now, this card can get us Gren Maju if it's destroyed. So that's neat. But it has to pull it from the graveyard. And if we have D-Fissure up, Macrocosm up, if we're under Different Dimension Ground, if we're under D-Shifter, or if Gren Maju just ends up getting banished, then this card doesn't really do a whole lot. So I'd be curious to see why we're running this one instead of the dark, because you can make the dark one in this deck. And the dark one's phenomenal, because that's the thing, like, there's not really a whole lot of targets for this card, too, when it's summoned, other than Ash, to my knowledge. Unless you're playing Salamangreat, or against Salamangreat. One copy of the Horatic Xyz 8 monster. I think this is the oldest card in the deck. Or in the extra deck, I should say. It is one of the oldest cards overall. This or Gren Maju is probably the only one that's older. Anti-Spell's pretty old, too. And so are these two cards, actually, as well. But in the extra deck, this is the oldest card. One copy of the Orcus Xyz monster. One copy of number 30 Titanic Galaxy. Hope Harbinger. Negate spells. And then one copy of, I believe this is Access Code Talker. But let me know what you guys think. Just a little bit of a fun deck profile. Top 4 deck ran by Minsu. No, should be like right here or something like that, right? Let me know what you guys think in those comments down below. Make sure you guys let me know as nicely as possible what cards I mispronounced and what each effects do. Like I said, keep it clean. Keep it PG, right? Okay. But make sure you guys click that like button if you did like the video. Subscribe for even more content and deck profiles like this. But most importantly of all, have a good day.